weddings. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I do a lot of weddings. And if you haven't noticed, you're not paying attention. And you need to read my Facebook page more often. That's how I would tell you that. I have done a lot of weddings, and I meet with these couples and we talk about what's important to them and what they want the wedding to look like and sound like and be like. And I always ask them this question, and especially I ask this question when we're in person. So pretend in your head that you see me sitting at my desk with this couple that have come to be married. And they're sitting there and we've introduced ourselves. So I look at them both, and with all of the sincerity that I can muster, which I want you to know, I can muster sincerity. I look at them and say, so you think you really want to get married? Why? Because one of the things that I learned a long time ago is if I can talk them out of getting married, it's probably a good thing. I'm never successful at that, just so you know. So I ask them, why do you want to get married? And the answer is always exactly the same, and it's the same person that gives it. It's always the bride. She looks over at the groom with these lovingly doe in the headlight eyes going, because we love each other. And he's looking at me. Yeah, what she said. It almost always comes out that way. And I go, great, you love each other. What does that mean? Oh, we like to be together. Well, what happens if you're not happy with each other? We're never not happy with each other. And he goes, or she goes, and then I know I've got them, because we're going to have a long talk about what love is. And then I say, you may have heard this passage from 1 Corinthians 13 that we've been in, and you all have memorized the last verse because, the preacher said he was going to test you. So, Brad, can I test you on the last verse?
Faith, hope, and love, grace and love.
He got it.
Yeah.
What about you, Clayton? You have it down, the last verse?
Faith, hope, and love, and grace and love.
There you go. Give these two brave guys a hand. I didn't cue them ahead of time, and you can all relax because I'm probably not going to call on you for that one next. Let me tell you something about that verse, though. You don't get to that verse without all of the things that Paul writes in the chapter before that. And if you want to get really serious about it, you don't get to chapter 13, verse 13, which is what that is, without all of chapter 13 and all of chapter 12. Because chapter 12, Paul spends a whole bunch of time talking about spiritual gifts and how each and every one of us has gifts from God that God has put within us to use for the glory of his kingdom. And all of that goes on until he gets to the end of chapter 12, and he says, but there's still one more. And he says in chapter 12 that Kathy may have one gift, and Ruth may have a different gift, and Katie has another gift. In fact, all of us have different gifts. None of us have exactly the same gifts. And the way we know that is because if everybody had exactly the same gifts, we couldn't even stand each other. I'll just tell you that. I mean, think about if every one of you had the gift of prophecy and you just spent your whole day prophesying, and you came to church and you all just prophesied. You know what we'd have? Noise. Because I know how you all are. You all wouldn't wait your turn. You would think it was your turn now. Because that's the way we are as people. And so we would have lots and lots of prophesying going on, but no hospitality. Or we would have lots and lots and lots of hospitalities, but no compassion. So it's not good for us all to have the same gift. And Paul says, all of that's true. He says, but, and I love it when Paul says but, because you know something important's about to happen. And he uses but a lot. He tells us when he's going to tell us something important. Isn't that nice? Isn't it good to know that if the preacher's going to tell you something important, he's going to tell you when you should write it down? I try to do that. I don't always remember. But I do give you space in your bulletin for notes, and I do expect you to write things down. You just might have to maybe you write your own things down, and it might be a tic-tac-toe game with your husband because you're bored. If you're bored, you get to preach next week. I'll have nobody admit to being bored today. Besides which, the sermon for next week's already written. So here's the thing. We're all having all of these gifts in chapter 12, and we get to live them out, and we get to experience them, and we're supposed to use them. And we're also supposed to get to chapter 13. And in chapter 13, it says, now remember this, if I have all of the wisdom in the world, but don't love anybody, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So we know what's coming. He's going to talk about love. And he's not going to talk about just any kind of love. He's going to use this great word, agape, 9 times in 13 verses. Think about that for a minute. 9 times, 13 verses. And some of the verses are just 3 words together. So he's making a point. You know, we get to this point, and he's telling us, you got to love each other. You got to love each other. You got to turn to a neighbor and say, you got to love each other. You just quoted Paul. Isn't that good to know? You just quoted Paul. And if you can't quote Paul in church, who can you quote, right? So what does it mean? What does love look like for Paul? Well, it's really clear what love looks like to Paul, because he uses this agapic love every single time. He doesn't use the word eros. He doesn't use the word philios or philia. He uses agape. And agape is kind of an interesting word because it hasn't got a tense, and it hasn't got it's gender neutral. All of the other words for love have different endings because you would use them differently in the sentences. And if you spoke Greek, you would know if he was talking about a man, a woman, or whatever. So all of that's in there. But then he uses this word agape 9 times. And agape is really this word that says love. And then Paul says 2 things to love. Love God, love others. Repeat that. Love God, love others. You've heard that before from this pulpit. You've heard it from your seats. You've seen it on our signs and on our, that's what we do. We love God and we love others. That is the shortest version of our vision and mission statement possible. We used another word at the beginning. It says, together, we love God and love others. Oh, that word together, that's about agape. That is a choice. You see, agape love is a choice to love people, whether they love you back or not. Let me tell you, all the couples that I married, if during that session on the couch with the bride and the groom, and the groom's or the bride says, because we love each other. And if the groom said, no, we don't, I'd be out of wedding. They would cancel that wedding in a heartbeat. And they probably should. Her little heart's going to be broken. Or his heart's going to be broken. When we choose to love, like Paul talks about, he talks about it in terms of being together, in terms of being in a community, in terms of this, the fellowship of the body of Christ. And I love when we get to have special offerings like Week of Compassion and the reconciliation offering, and there's 5 of them. I can't remember all of them right now, but there's a whole bunch of them. And they remind us that it isn't just the First Christian Church Disciples of Christ in Junction City, Oregon that exists. No, there are 3,000 odd churches in our denomination in the United States and Canada. That doesn't count any of our churches in Haiti or Africa or Asia. And we have churches in all of those places. We are together the church. And that doesn't count the 13 other churches in Junction City and the 5 maybe in Harrisburg. I don't know how many is in Harrisburg. And I think there are 2 in Monroe. That doesn't even cover our Tri-County area. When we talk about agape love, Paul says that is all of you together. So look at somebody and say together. I don't think you believe me. It's all right. It's true anyway. So we talked 2 weeks ago about love starting with the cross. Well, where do you think Paul starts talking about agape love from? The cross. He says Jesus died for us. He gave us his all. He did everything that he could do for us just so we could come back to the Father. And don't you think that that warrants our love of him? And in Paul's opinion, and in my opinion, and I hope in your opinion, that means that God loved us so much that we're going to love God back. We're going to choose that. And you know what? It hurts God's feelings. I'm just going to tell you this. It hurts God's feelings when we choose not to love God back. Now, the good news is God isn't like us. When you hurt my feelings, I might turn my back on you and say, you don't want to have anything to do with me? Fine. Any of you ever do something like that? Nobody's going to admit to that, but I know you are people. Look at the person sitting next to you. They are people, aren't they? Every time. David says, no, my people in front of me are people. I don't know what that says about you, Ruth. But, so here's the thing. Paul says it starts with Jesus on the cross. And then he says, and it's different, or like we learned last week, radical than any of the other kinds of love that you're talking about. And you all, the response last week was really awesome. You guys were awesome talking about radical love and how it's different than normal human love and normal people love and normal things that happen. But it isn't just about being radical. It's also about being practical. You see, Paul says, yeah, it starts at the cross. It's this love that's different, more radical than any other love. But he says, let me tell you what love looks like in person. And he gives us verses 4 through 7, and it sounds like this. I'm going to put my glasses on because I want you to hear it, and I want you to hear the practicality here. Love is patient. And some of you just went, whoops, not me. Love is kind. And we went, whoops, not them. I've seen them. No, you would never do that. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. I read this oftentimes at wedding, and I stop at that one. It keeps no record of wrong. You can't keep score of when the spouse does something bad. You can't keep score when somebody at church doesn't do it the way you want it to do. I have to, that's me. I watch you all do things and I go, I wouldn't do that. Right? What are they doing? And then I remember, let them do it. It's going to be okay. Any of you competitive? I'm going to love more people than you are. It's a dare. Outlove me. How many people can you love more than me? And how are you going to know? I don't know. But if it's a competition, some of us are all in. You know, we used to have competition at youth group growing up. How many kids can you bring? I won. Anybody surprised? The first day I brought 14 people, 7 of them were related. You know, when you have as many first cousins as I do, and you're offering pizza, it's an easy thing. Come and have pizza with my youth group. We'll play football and have a great time. And you might learn something about Jesus. I didn't tell them that. I didn't tell them they were going to learn about Jesus. I just said, we're going to play football and eat pizza. Peter, are you in for that? I mean, how do you miss with that, right? You know, all of my cousins. Okay, we had great football teams. Then they talked about Jesus. And here was the really cool thing. When Dennis talked about Jesus, some of my cousins listened. And you know what? They actually came back the next Sunday. And eventually they joined and they became a part of the church and they became Christian. And some of them went off to NCC and still did ministry. Oh. Pizza and football. Who knew? It may have just been the pizza. I don't think it was just the football, but anyway, so love is practical, Paul says. He says, love is when you're kind to each other. See, I love this because how many of you have noticed that we've been talking as a community and as a county and as little towns and big towns about kindness a lot? Choose kindness. White yard sign, black letters, choose kindness. On the other side, it says it in Spanish, which I can't say, but it says choose kindness. Why do we have to have yard signs that tell people to choose kindness? Because we live in a world that's not very kind to each other. You know, I tell people we only put signs up when there's a problem. Do you know why we have stop signs at intersections? Because we're not very kind drivers. We don't watch out for the other guy. We go through. And you know what? If 2 cars go through the same intersection at the same time, it's bad. 2 cars are going to lose and people are going to lose. That's the way it works. So we have stop signs. It's the only reason you have a stop sign. Because we're not kind drivers. Then the city figured out it was a great way to make money. So we're going to make them red, octagon, and if they go through them, even if they don't hit somebody, we're going to charge them $100. Then it got more complicated. They made stoplights with cameras. I know you all hate them. I love them. You have big signs that say, photo stoplights ahead. I remember in Gurnee, Illinois, when they put that in the they put cameras in the 3rd worst intersection in all of Chicagoland. It was in Gurnee, Illinois. It had 4 lanes going this way, 4 lanes coming this way with a turn lane. So there were 9 lanes across. The second biggest outlet mall in the world is on the right. Another shopping center is on the left over here, and Sam's and Walmart is over here. And in Christmas, I never went that direction ever. Between 9 and 12 people died in that intersection every year. So the chief of police, Bob Jones, great guy, proposes that we put in a camera stoplight there. Oh, the hullabaloo. Let me tell you. We don't need that. That's just a moneymaker for the city. Let me tell you. They made a big announcement. Every house in Gurnee got 3 phone calls saying, by the way, at this intersection, there's going to be cameras If you run the light, it's going to take your picture and you're going to get a ticket. So they put the signs up, they put the cameras in. For the first month, they didn't send a single ticket. It wasn't that people didn't run it. They took the pictures and they sent them to the people and said, as of February 1st, which was the next month, if this is you, your ticket's $150. People didn't believe them. The first month, they paid the chief's salary. Now, let me tell you how they did it. They hired 2 officers to look at every single picture, and there's 4 pictures in this segment. And the instruction was from the chief of police to those officers, we're only going to write a ticket if you were sitting there and you saw it, would you give them a ticket? They threw out almost 2/3 of the tickets, and they still paid for the chief's salary. Within 5 months, the 3rd worst intersection in all of Chicagoland, which includes a lot, was not even in the top 25.
Wow.
I see a sign that says picture taking stoplight. I make sure I stop all the way, because not every jurisdiction is nice as Gurney is. I hear that about places around here. But we do that because we have to be taught to be kind. That's the only reason. It's not about money, it's helping people get along with each other and being together. You know, all of this stuff that Paul says, he tells us what it's not. It's not envious or rude. It's not boastful or arrogant. It's always protecting, always trusting. That's about motives, by the way. It doesn't make any sense. Love always trusts. What does that mean? It means love, your motives are important. You know, if you just love people because you think it's going to benefit you, no. You have to love people even when it's not going to benefit you. Love is patient and gentle. My favorite, love never, ever, ever, ever gives up. Boy, that's hard. And that's what brings us to Week of Compassion. Love can't ever give up. Why? Because tragedy is happening all the time. Tragedies happen everywhere we go, and has happened forever. I want to end with a story about Howard Thurman. He grew up in the early 1900s in Daytona, Florida, where educational opportunities for Blacks were quite limited. In fact, as he was growing up, there were only 3 high schools for Blacks in the entire state of Florida. The closest private church-related high school was in Jacksonville, about 90 miles away. His community pooled their resources because they knew he was smart, he could read, he was brilliant. They knew, so they pooled their resources. They took an offering and bought him a ticket. He got to the train station, and Thurman learned he would have to pay extra to ship his ratty, rope-tied trunk. See, luggage fees have been around forever. He didn't have the money. He sat down on the steps of the rail station and was crying because he didn't know what he was going to do. And a stranger came up and said, "What's the problem?" And he told him. And he says, "Get your trunk. I'll pay for its Shipman. Before Thurman could thank him, the man walked away. Thurman never saw him again. In his autobiography, he wrote, "To the stranger in the railroad station in Daytona Beach, who restored my broken dream 65 years ago. Kindness is never forgotten when it comes from the heart." So my friends, practice kindness. Practice love, like Paul talks about it. You don't know whose life it will change. Howard Thurman became one of Martin Luther King's leading advisors. And his autobiography is awesome.